Want to encourage people that, when they have problems with each other, just to resolve it with words or just walk away from it.
This is my daughter. This ain't no picture. Just say, hey, say this is my dad.
Hey, this is my daddy.
Say this is what we do.
And she loved everybody. She just wanted to be, she said, I don't want none, but I want to have, I want to help. And she brought in the room when she walked in.
It's very rare. We did have 5 confirmed.
Fist fight, and then the next day they were friends. Now it's terrible, just terrible the way that these young people are doing today.
A 17-year-old little girl was gone for no reason at all. It breaks my heart, and it breaks my heart for any other family that has to go through this.
Mother and aunt struggling to explain what happened.
Yeah,
It's a mystery.
wrong place, wrong time. I mean, it was an innocent 17-year-old little girl that has lost her life over stupidity.
Love to death, Chan. It was his own son's voice on the phone that walked him to his death. January 25th, 2022. Fort Worth, Texas, Kevin Brown. Senior steps out of his front door just before 5 in the afternoon, phone pressed to his ear, nothing on his mind but the mail. He walks down the driveway, opens the box. It's empty. He closes it and just stands there, still on the call. A black Chrysler 200 has been sitting on the street for over 10 minutes. Nobody inside it is waiting on the mail. One shot to the head. Kevin drops at the edge of his own driveway. Brick dust from the mailbox floats in the air. The Chrysler disappears around the corner. The whole thing takes seconds. And somewhere inside Tarrant County Jail, his son Braylin is still on the line. Kevin Brown Sr. was born in Fort Worth in 1974. He wasn't famous. He wasn't connected to anything that would normally make someone a target. By his late 40s, he was a father, doing what fathers do, keeping the lights on, staying present, trying to hold something together for the people around him. That's what the people who knew him said, that he was trying. His son Braylin, who went by Crazy Boy Bray in the streets and in the studio, was a different story. By the time Braylin was in his early 20s, his name was already known across Fort Worth's east side. Not for the music, though the music was real. He was a rolling 60s Crips member, documented by authorities, connected to a string of violent incidents that had been building since at least 2019. He had talent. A collaboration with Dallas rapper Mo3 was climbing toward millions of views. His lyrics were raw and specific. Street life, loyalty, survival. The kind of verses that land because the person writing them actually lived close to the edge, but the edge kept getting closer. In January 2020, Braylin and an associate named Adrian Robinson were riding through Fort Worth, allegedly looking for a teenage rapper named Channel 5 J-Dub, a rival who had crossed them. Robinson's girlfriend was driving. The men were hunting. They never found J-Dub. Instead, on January 9th, a 33-year-old woman named Anjanette Eubanks was shot and killed inside a home on Canyon Circle Drive. She was visiting friends. She had nothing to do with any feud. People who knew her described her as warm, motherly, the kind of person who made a room feel safer just by being in it. 3 days later, a 17-year-old named Cheyenne Moore was shot on East Rosedale Street while sitting in a car. She had dreamed of becoming a pediatric nurse. She was gone before she ever got the chance. 2 women, 2 lives, both killed in the crossfire of something that had nothing to do with them. Prosecutors later tied both deaths directly to Braylin's actions. He wasn't a bystander in what happened to them, he was the reason it happened. By early 2021, he was in custody at Tarrant County Jail, facing serious charges for both killings. The music paused. The streets quieted down around him, and then, from inside a cell, he got a phone call that changed everything. Kevin Jr., Braylin's older brother, had been killed during a robbery attempt before all of this unfolded. His death had left a wound in the Brown family that never fully closed. And Kevin Jr. had left behind a woman, Rebecca Willis, known to everyone around her as Shay. She had a child with Kevin Jr. That child carried the family name. What happened next is the part that broke everything. While Braylin sat in jail, charged with murder, Facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars, his father, Kevin Sr., began a relationship with Shay, the same woman who had been with his dead brother, the same woman whose child with Kevin Jr. was essentially Braylin's nephew. Kevin Sr. and Shay then had a child together. According to Braylin's own words, pulled later from jail communications, he described his father's actions with one word: grimy. That word did a lot of work. It carried grief, betrayal, shame, and rage all at once. His brother was dead. His father had crossed a line that by any measure of loyalty or decency should never have been crossed, and Braylin was behind bars, powerless, hearing about it through a phone call from his sister, crying, unable to accept what she was telling him. "I can't accept that," he would later say. "I'm not accepting that." He didn't. From his cell at Tarrant County Jail, Braylin Brown began to plan the murder of his own father, Love to Death Channel. Planning a murder from inside a jail cell requires a certain level of confidence, the kind that tends to outrun actual competence. Braylin had the motive locked in. Now he needed people, a method, and a way to communicate without anyone noticing. He had access to a jail-issued tablet. He had phone privileges. And he had associates on the outside who, for one reason or another, were willing to listen. The first person he turned to was Damon Cotton, 19 years old, connected to Braylin through the streets. Cotton would be the shooter, the one who actually pulled the trigger, and Braylin made sure he understood exactly what that meant. The agreed payment was somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000. That was the price on Kevin Brown Sr.'s life. Cotton's girlfriend, Ashlyn Durham, would drive the car. A woman named Alexis Abita, another associate of Braylin's, was assigned 2 jobs: source the ammunition and set up the phone calls that would make the whole operation run. 3 people, clear roles, a plan built piece by piece from behind prison walls. Braylin didn't speak plainly in his messages. Guns were controllers. Bullets were pieces. The coded language gave him some cover, or so he thought. What it actually did was create a paper trail of carefully worded instructions that investigators would later read line by line in a courtroom. As if nobody was going to check the tablet, the setup required one specific thing. Kevin Sr. had to be outside at the right moment. He wasn't going to come out on his own schedule, not if the plan was going to work. So, Braylin solved that too. Through Alexis Abeta, he arranged a 3-way call. The idea was straightforward. Braylin would get his father on the phone. He'd keep him talking. And at the right moment, he'd direct him outside to check the mailbox. Kevin would walk out because his son asked him to. He had no reason not to. On the afternoon of January 25th, 2022, it all came together on Beacon Way. The Chrysler 200 pulled onto the street and sat. Durham at the wheel, Cotton in the back seat, rifle ready. They waited. 10 minutes, maybe a little more. Then Kevin Sr. came through his front door, phone to his ear. No hurry. He walked down the driveway, opened the mailbox, found nothing inside, and stood there, right where the driveway meets the street, still on the call with his son. Cotton leaned from the rear window and opened fire. One of the rounds struck Kevin in the head. He went down at the edge of his own driveway. Brick fragments from the mailbox scattered across the concrete. The Chrysler pulled away. Neighbors who stepped outside found a man dead at his mailbox on a quiet street on a Tuesday afternoon. Police responded within minutes. There was nothing left to respond to. Kevin Brown Sr. was 47 years old. Investigators didn't have much to go on at the scene. A black Chrysler, shell casings, surveillance footage from nearby cameras showing the car idling on the street before the shooting, long enough that it should have been suspicious, but nobody had thought anything of it at the time. The early assumption was that this might be retaliation. Braylin was already in custody facing murder charges. It wasn't unreasonable to think a rival had targeted his father while he was out of reach. That kind of thing happened. It was a working theory. It didn't hold up for long. As detectives dug deeper, the shape of what actually happened became harder to ignore. They looked at Braylin's jail communications. The tablet messages, the phone calls, the letters. What they found there wasn't the behavior of a man who had nothing to do with his father's death. The coded messages were there, controllers, pieces, specific instructions moving from inside the jail to people on the outside. And then the intercepted letters, physical letters, written by Braylin and found inside the home of one of his associates, filled in what the digital messages left out. The three-way call on January 25th was documented. The timing matched. The phone records placed Braylin in contact with Abida and with his father in the minutes before the shooting. The motive, once investigators understood it, made the whole thing worse. This wasn't gang business. There was no rival, no territory, no debt. It was a father who had crossed a line his son couldn't live with, and a son who decided, from a jail cell, that the only answer was a bullet. Braylin Brown was charged with capital murder. At trial, he took the stand. That decision alone said something about how confident he was in his own version of events, or how badly he misjudged what the jury already knew. He told them he had given his life to God, that he wasn't out here plotting to kill people, that he certainly wasn't plotting to kill his own father. When asked directly whether he had ever killed anyone, his answer was careful. "I never killed nobody in my life." Then, in the same breath, he added a qualifier. Someone hurt his family? He'd kill them. Someone came for him? He'd kill them. The jury had already read the letters. Prosecutors walked through the evidence methodically. The tablet messages, the coded language, the three-way call, the intercepted letters recovered from his associate's home. They laid out a timeline that left very little room for alternative explanations. Braylin had identified the target, recruited the shooter, arranged the getaway driver, sourced the ammunition through Abeda, and then personally placed the call that walked his father out of his front door and into Cotton's sightline. Every piece connected back to him. The trial ran 8 days. The jury didn't take long. Braylin Brown was convicted of first-degree murder, sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Damon Cotton was also convicted and sentenced to life. The plan that Braylin had built so carefully, the coded messages, the separate roles, the controlled phone calls, none of it was enough. The architecture of the operation turned out to be the clearest evidence against him. He had left a detailed record of his own intent, spread across a jail tablet and a stack of handwritten letters, and investigators had found all of it. Bold move, genuinely terrible execution. Love to death, Channa. After the verdict, the courtroom cleared, the case closed, and the Brown family was left to figure out what was left. Not much. Kevin Sr. was gone. Braylin was gone, not dead, but sealed behind a life sentence with no way out. Kevin Jr. had already been killed years before any of this happened. 3 men from the same family, all lost to violence across less than a decade. What remained was the people who loved them, trying to make sense of a situation that doesn't make sense no matter how long you sit with it. Shay, Rebecca Willis, was at the center of it all and connected to almost none of the choices that destroyed everything around her. She had a child with Kevin Jr. She later had a child with Kevin Sr., 2 children, 2 fathers, both gone. Whatever her life looked like before January 2022, it looks different now. Kevin Sr.'s daughter, the child he had with Shay, will grow up knowing her father was murdered, knowing who ordered it, knowing the man who made that call shares her blood. That's not something you explain away. That's something a child carries. Braylin, by the time of his father's murder trial, was already serving time for other offenses. The killing of Kevin Sr. added a life sentence on top of what he was already facing. There are reportedly additional cases still connected to his name. He was in his early 20s when all of this happened. He will almost certainly die in prison. At some point before the trial, someone close to him told him to take a plea deal, to be grateful he might see another day. He didn't listen. He took the stand instead, told the jury he had given his life to God, that he wasn't the kind of person who plotted murders. The jury had already read his letters. There's a version of Braylin Brown's life where the music was the story. The Mo3 collaboration was real. The talent was real. That track was approaching 9 million views while he sat in a cell waiting for trial, which is a strange thing to hold in your head. The reach was there. The audience was there. Mo3 himself would later be shot and killed on a Dallas highway in November 2020. Another voice from the same world gone too soon. Two artists from the same city, the same streets. One killed before he got to see what he could have become. The other one alive, but not in any way that resembles a life. The question people always reach for in cases like this is why? As if the answer would make it easier to hold. Braylin felt betrayed. That part is real. His brother was dead. His father crossed a line that by any standard of loyalty or decency should not have been crossed. The grief was real. The anger was real. But grief and anger don't build operational plans. They don't recruit shooters. They don't write coded letters about controllers and pieces and arrange three-way calls to time a murder. That level of calculation requires something beyond emotion. It requires a decision, a deliberate, sustained, sober decision made over days and weeks and phone calls from inside a jail cell. Braylin chose this, all of it. He chose it knowing he had children, knowing that whatever happened next, they would grow up in the wreckage of it. He chose it knowing his sister would lose her father, that his nephew, Kevin Jr.'s child, the one Shay had before any of this, would lose his grandfather. He chose it anyway. Kevin Brown Sr. made choices too. The relationship with Shay was a choice, a damaging one, a betrayal of trust that people closest to him couldn't easily forgive. None of that is nothing. None of that disappears because he was the one who died. But there is no version of that betrayal that justifies what followed. Kevin Sr. was 47 years old. He was standing at his mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon. His phone was to his ear. The last voice he heard was his son's. Whatever he was expecting from that day, whatever small, ordinary thing he thought was coming next, it wasn't this. He deserved better than how his story ended. They all did. Love to Death Channel. Call to action. If this case stayed with you, you're not alone. Stories like this one don't leave easily, and there are more of them. Subscribe to Love to Death Channel for more true crime cases built around relationships, betrayal, and the moments that change families forever. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Fair use notice. This video is produced for educational and commentary purposes only. All footage and images used in this production fall under fair use guidelines as protected under Section 107 of the U.S. Copyright Act.